knihovně Václava Havla pro vás každý měsíc připravujeme až 20 akcí bez vstupného. Každý měsíc až 20 rozhovorů, debat a vzdělávacích videí na havelchannel.cz. Spolupracujeme s více než 1000 učitelů napříč republikou. Pořádáme workshopy, výstavy, vydáváme knihy. Náš archiv čítá přes 60 000 obrazových a psaných dokumentů. Každý rok udělujeme cenu Václava Havla za lidská práva bojovníkům za svobodu z celého světa. Pomozte nám i vy udržovat odkaz Václava Havla živý a přispějte na naši činnost na www.havelnavždy.cz. Děkujeme.
Musím si uvědomit, že mám mluvit anglicky. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another debate organized by the Respect Weekly and Václav Havel Library. As it was announced, this debate is going to be held in English, so I'm sure you all speak English and it's not going to be translated into Czech, so we're going to speak in English. Also, welcome to the audience of Havel channel, who are watching us hopefully from their homes on their computers. I am very glad that we have two special guests here tonight. Zuzana Kříhová, she's a professor of Iranian studies from the Department of Middle East at the Philosophic Faculty of Charles University. Good evening.
Very nice to meet you.
And also Ariane Monfradeník. Again, I'm not sure if I pronounce your surname correctly, hopefully yes. He is an Iranian student of politics, philosophy and economics at the Faculty of Social Sciences at the Charles University. And he is also one of the leaders of the, may I call, Prague branch of the protests that are currently happening, or the protests that are happening in Prague. Welcome and good evening also.
Thank you, dobrý večer.
We can switch to Czech now, as you said.
Turučka.
Okay. So, of course, the topic of our debate is what's going on in Iran. I looked at the date, and today is October the 18th and September the 16th, so a little over a month ago. A young woman named Mashy Amíní was killed by the Iranian so-called morality police. When I did my research, I noticed that her death was not the first incident in this, so to speak, new wave of restrictions against women in Iran. They were happening all over the summer, but her death sparked protests, and they now last for several weeks. There are some voices that see hope in these protests, and they're quite optimistic in analyzing what's going on in Iran. And just today I've read an article in the Foreign Affairs magazine with the title "The Beginning of the End of the Islamic Republic." So my first question is going completely opposite the advice that it's given how to start a debate, which should be an easy question, but I'm going to start the debate with maybe not so easy question. And the question is this the beginning of the end of the Islamic Republic?
So this is a very direct question. I don't think we can reply to this question with yes or no. No one knows. It's true that the protests are continuing for 4 weeks, and they spread to more than 100 towns, major towns in Iran, into smaller towns as well. And the people are going to streets nearly every day, in the evening, in the afternoons. The protests are continuing at the universities and as well as in secondary schools. And I would say all strata of Iranian society are involved. So I think it's quite significant, and maybe there is a part of my answer to this question, but again, it's impossible in this phase to answer yes or no.
We will, of course, analyze how the protests are going on and who's involved later on, but maybe I'll just have a little follow-up question. Does the fact that it's in so many towns and that all parts of Iranian society are involved, does it provide some hope that this could actually mean significant change in the country?
It's definitely significant change comparing to protests in the past, mainly in 2019 or 2009. At that time there were huge protests as well. But it concentrated at that times to large cities as Tehran, Shiraz, Isfahan. Now it spread to all provinces in Iran. It spread it as well to all ethnic minorities, ethnic communities. It is in Sistan and Baluchistan, in the borders with Pakistan, in Kurdistan, Kurdish parts of Iran, in the borders with Turkey and Iraq. In Azerbaijani part of Iran, which is in the north of Iran. So this is also the difference which just didn't happen in the past, and I think it's very significant.
Mm-hmm. Ariane, of course, for safety reasons, we shouldn't disclose many details maybe about you or how much in contact you are with your family and friends in Iran, but maybe again, I will ask the tough question, but maybe if we could start, if you can tell us how long have you been living in Prague, why did you come here, and then why did you start the protests? Why do you think it's important that these protests have also so-called branches in other towns and other countries other than Iran?
Well, just to mention about myself, I came to Prague about a year ago. And I used to study industrial engineering, but my mind and my activities were also related to the politics, because if you are born in Iran, you cannot be, in the shadows of the politics. You are all the time, every aspect of your life is heavily entangled with the politics. So I came here I had other opportunities, but I came here because specifically I wanted to know what is happening 30 years after the communism, because I was trying to get some aspects for myself that what's happening maybe for us in future. And after 1 year, I can say that maybe my choice was really right, because I can see how the society is developing. And for your question about why I'm doing something, because I cannot say that I am an organizer of big movement or something, because the actual thing is happening in the streets in Iran, and we as an Iranian diaspora, we are just trying to be their voice and amplify their voice. And at the same time, we cannot just sit and watch the news. We have to actively participate.
Mm-hmm. And how does it so far, what's your, how do you feel it's turning out? Do you have support here? How does it feel to organize these protests? How do you see the result of them so far?
Well, at the beginning was really hard, because we had to just, encounter with Czech people, then just tell them where is Iran, what is happening there. Because the general public awareness about that region is not that much specific, which I can understand. But, after 1 month now, I can say that most of the Czech people has just heard the name of Iran in last month, more or less, through the TV news or in the streets. And right now, I can see that more and more people are approaching to us to first know what's happening and then asking what can they do.
Mm-hmm. And is there another goal apart from you can't sit and just watch what's happening there? Do you think that there's another goal of these protests happening here in Prague and elsewhere in the world?
Yes. First of all, we have to, after raising the awareness, we have to push politicians to more decisive actions, because specifically these protests has some differences about in comparison with others, but the reaction of politicians are still the same. So what we should do is just to move them to act more decisively and hear their population, because the politicians here listen to their voters. So if we raise the awareness of the voters, we have the leverage to do something.
Mm-hmm. What do you think Czech politicians should do, and what can they do actually about the situation in Iran?
Well, that's a tough question, because
I am beginning with tough questions in this debate, yeah.
Well, first of all, they have to know what's happening there, because in my encounters I realized that in Czech politics is so busy with other matters, and that they don't have good picture of what's happening there. So first we have to raise the awareness of the politicians in a proper way. Second, yeah, maybe Czech Republic, according to the politicians, is not the most powerful European nation, but they do have the soft power. Politicians are in Brussels, their voice is being heard everywhere. So in the other way they can have some influence over others, and especially right now Czech is the president of the European Union. So and Czech embassy in Tehran is the only representative of the European Union there. So right now there are more things that they can do.
Mm-hmm. And are you happy with what they're doing or not doing so far?
I can say that we are happy. Being happy is really I don't know how to say that, because I'm not happy, but I'm happy. I'm happy that they are saying something for the first time, but I'm not happy that they are just trying to wait and see what others are doing. They don't want to take the initiative. And I do understand that maybe they are more conservative in foreign policies, but at the same time, when there is a movement going on, the sooner you try to approach people, the better you're gonna get the result. So I think it can be better.
And also, there is a tradition of supporting liberation movements all over not only Europe but the world. And the Czech diplomacy did support movements in Belarus and, of course, Ukraine at the moment. That's a big chunk of the policy.
If I can interrupt, I would like to say that I think last Tuesday it was the Czech Senate accepted declaration about a protest in Iran. It accused Iranian regime from atrocities and also supported protests in Iran. And I think it was for the first time in our post-revolutionary history, and the Czech Senate actually accepted this regulation or declaration towards Iran, or any declaration. So I think it was the first step. It was very important. And
maybe symbolically.
Exactly, like any symbolical declaration of moral support towards the Iranian movement is extremely important at this moment. Many governments of Western European countries did that, Spanish parliament, for example, and some others. So we can just follow this trace, and Iranians are watching that and are very much aware of that. And it's just great support at the beginning. Of course, as Ariane has told, we can put some sort of like soft power in the European Parliament, European Union. We can foster sanctions against Iran, and this is what can we do in the moment. At the moment.
We'll discuss the sanctions and if they actually work absolutely later. But I realized, Ariane, I haven't asked you the tough question from the beginning. So do you think this is the beginning of the end of the Islamic Republic?
Well, that's really tough question. But I'm not sure that if it's going to be the end of the Islamic Republic. Maybe yes, but it's going to end many other aspects of Iranian society and Iranian government. For like 40 years, women and youngsters has been under heavy regulations for every aspect of their life. And now, after 40 years, they just realized that they can do against that regulations. So, when you awake a mind, that mind is not going to sleep anymore. And right now we can see, unfortunately, that the protests are going to schools and the universities, and youngsters are mostly involved. So I'm really sad for that, because the consequences is not good. I mean, they are attacking schools, but at the same time I can see the future generation is not going to say yes to any regulations that someone is putting on them.
Yeah, I absolutely want to discuss this. So we're now, as I said, over a month in the protests. What do you think is happening? Is there some important development which would tell us where it's actually going, and if there's a hope for succession? And as you mentioned, we now see that the protests are coming to secondary schools with some, of course, horrible consequences, that there are schoolgirls, very young women being killed. But at the same time, is it some kind of a very important signal that the youngest or younger generation is actually participating?
Well, younger generation born in 90s, from 90s, it participated in the protest at the beginning. From the beginning, there is more than 30 youngsters being killed since the beginning of protests. I think 34. But the first 2 weeks, the protests were mainly in the streets of large towns. Then it spread it to universities. Now it's also in secondary schools. There was a huge uprising in Ardabil region in the north of Iran, and there was a girl in a secondary school who was killed for not willing to sing a song in a support of Rahbar and the regime, actually. And I think she was like 15 or 16 years old.
16, I think I read it in Guardian.
In another step or in change, there were signs of strikes. Not the general strikes, but strikes in a petrochemical industry in the southern parts of Iran, which are extremely important. It's a very strategical region. And of course, we cannot talk about general strikes of all industrial workers, but in several factories, there are people who are striking and not going to work. They are being threatened by government. I have heard that some of them can be replaced by Chinese workers. It's not confirmed. Any news which come from Iran is very hard now to confirm because there is a complete lack of internet connection. So it's extremely dangerous for anyone to send anything from Iran. Like very recent news, what I have heard, like people are also protesting people are attacking the bases of so-called Basiji forces, which is like Iranian militia. It's also a very significant change comparing to the protests in recent years. People are not attacking mosques. They are very careful, like not to sort of attack the emotions or religious emotions of their believer counterparts or like other
people who are religious. And that's a smart move, right? Because you don't want to alienate
I
other
think it's
people.
extremely smart, and they are like spreading this message. And what we didn't mention, the emergence of women nearly on all protests everywhere. You know, like women are in the first rows. And they are extremely brave, extremely bold. They are attacking the forces of Basiji or Sepah, revolutionary guards, with like bold hands and uncovering themselves, of course, like hijab only.
And the women, sorry to interrupt. So when you compare this year's protest to the other waves of protests, which, if I'm not mistaken, important year was 2009 and then 2017 and 2019, women weren't as present in these previous protests. Is it the main difference, and why not?
They were present, you know, they were present in 2009 protests, 2019 protests as well. But like now, the main difference, I would say, is that first, the protest started the death of a woman, Mashy Amíní. So it's such an emotional impact on anyone in Iranian society, and mainly women. So I think we can agree that women were all the time parts of protest movement in Iran, even in 2009. But now I would say like it's even more powerful. They are more visible in media. Of course, those unofficial media. Please don't imagine that on official news in Iran these protests are being captured. Absolutely not. So, this is a different.
Do you want to add something, or I just really am interested in the younger generation participation in the secondary schools, especially because, as you mentioned, and of course we're in Václav Havel's library, but when we compare it to the Velvet Revolution, of course the students were extremely important, but it was mainly university students, not as much secondary school students. So I think this is a really important moment for the protests, right?
Yes, it is. Actually, I have to mention that universities in Iran, most of them in the big cities, they are highly, in contact with political activities, because they are the youngsters living together, studying together, and I have to mention that that's the first time that boys and girls can come and share their ideas and experiences, because the schools are separated. Mm-hmm. And aside from that, that's the first step in your life, that you have a little bit more freedom to find others, and so at the same time I can say that these movements from the university has been there all over the years, even before the 1979 revolution. So being a student in Iranian university means that probably more or less you are going to be somehow,
quite political, right?
Some kind of political, and we can see that even in 1998, in 2009, and recently years ago, all of the movements as one particular show or scene in the universities. Now with the high schools, this is a completely new thing. Mm-hmm. If you go back 40 years ago, yeah, there was some cases of killing teenagers, mm-hmm. but attacking high schools and universities like this is a first of a kind. I'm really sad about it, and I'm really nervous, and it panics all of us. But at the same time, it has a really strong message, because if we go back a few months ago, there was an anthem made by the Islamic Republic, mm-hmm. somehow related to the communist ones or the Chinese, North Korean, and it was to praise the leader. But at the same time, the same people, the same boys and girls that were forced to sing that, they are protesting against that. So that's a really controversial picture of students. Mm-hmm. And recently, the girl who died in the Ardabil, she was kind of, as they say, forced to say that anthem, and she refused. So she was beaten, and unfortunately, she died.
Mm-hmm. Isn't this also a great risk, however, for the protests? Because when I read about the schoolgirls and the secondary schools and the students in various Western media, I also read great concerns of course, their parents and grandparents, and I even noticed that some say to their kids and grandkids, just don't go to school, and they're trying to protect them. So don't you see that there's some kind of risk that people will be so scared that their kids and grandkids are going to be killed in this situation, that maybe they will push back against doing something just for their safety?
Well, I think if I had a kid, I wouldn't let her go to school, because this is not their duty. They are too young. They need more time to learn, and that's not the time for them to change anything. But yeah, if you're living in a political country, after a year of 2-3, you will hear some political comments every day, and you're kind of, your life is, all aspects are influenced by the politics. So I'm really nervous, and I really like to say that this is not a good news, that the people and the young generations, high school people, are going to protest while their parents are still hesitant, or they are trying to do more moderate things like striking or stuff. But at the same time, I can see that they are fighting for their future, because they know that the previous generation...
That's such a strong message, isn't it? That if
they want to say that this is not the country I want to live in. And if you have heard that many younger Iranians, they are trying to go to abroad because they think that their mind is bigger than the country. So I can see it in the other way, that they want to change when they are young, so they can have the chance of living in the freedom.
I would say exactly these kind of atrocities are forcing people to continue with protests. Because 2 weeks ago, we thought the protests will be surpassed and people will not continue protesting because they were frightened. But because of these actions, attacks on secondary schools and universities, the people are following. Because they are, as Ariane told, fighting for the future of their children, the children of Generation Z, they call it Generation Z. just don't see any future for themselves, any vision. For 40 years they were been telling that their future will be bright and there will be equal society, and it's not happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just have this question here, that it could also have another opposite effect, that rather than fear, it could spark even more protests, because people realize this is the regime that is not hesitant to kill 15-year-old girls, which is shocking and horrible. So maybe it could even support more protests. It looks like it so far, or at the moment.
Yeah, I would say like the regime is now confused. It doesn't know exactly how to react to these their own atrocities, yeah? And it didn't use the full powers yet. Like in the previous protests in 2019, within 5 days were killed between 500 or 1,500 people within 5 days. Yeah, it didn't happen yet. As I told, within 4 weeks, only more than 200 people were killed. It's everything is unofficial numbers. Yeah. And why? Because as I have told, the protest spreads everywhere. So the regime has to put much more power to be able to suppress the protests in all cities. Yeah, they don't have so much power to. They don't have so much power to send the forces into every part of Iran.
They don't have it, or they're maybe not really willing to use it yet.
I'm sure they would be willing to use it. But it's just like difficult, as I have told before. Like people are now so brave, like attack the basis of that militia. Yeah. So I'm not telling that the regime would be scared, but it's obvious that it's being confused, like how to react to all these actions. So it's a question, like if the regime will start the harsh action as it did before. We are, I think, expecting with a horror, like every day. It's not happening. Also, there were some comments that the regime is a little bit willing to start negotiation. Yeah? But I would say that people are not willing to accept this negotiation anymore, because this has happened in 2009 during a protest, that people were still expecting some kind of reforms and negotiation, and it didn't happen. Yeah, so now the people reached the end, and they just don't have a feeling that this kind of hope would be an option for the future.
Why do you think there is some kind of signal that the regime or the president or whomever, the head of the government, are willing to negotiate?
Well, first of all, that they told that, but the negotiate was not like that. Hey, let's have an equal right and negotiate. It was like, okay, if you are not satisfied, you can tell your representatives, we will consider. So. And that was even more, it outraged people, because specifically like 2 years ago, it was another case of Navid Afkari. He was an athlete, and they arrested him, and they, put some kind of titles on him, and they were trying to execute him for 1 year. It was, so back and forth, and people were asking openly that, hey, don't stop that, stop the execution of him. He's not guilty at all. But at the same, and it was even international as well. But at the same time, they did that, and they did it so brutally. And they have shown many times that they are not willing to listen to anyone. So if they are asking that, it means that they are more desperate than before. And right now there are other signals as well, like they are using untrained militias, because they are just targeting people's heads and breasts, while the more trained military group, they target people's leg. So it shows that they are just angry people with the guns, and which is more dangerous.
They could be more dangerous, right?
Yeah, and at the same time, we can see they are using the the administrative people of the army. They're giving them guns or even kids in some really rare cases. So these are all new stuff. And at the same time, I think this is the first time that they are encountering counterattacks. So previously it was just people being killed.
Zuzana mentioned that people just strike back, so to speak.
But right now they are ready to die, and it makes me feel so proud and so sad at the same time that, you know, people are so desperate that they think that, okay, I'm ready to fight to death. And especially youngsters, that's even so brave of them. You know, the pictures that you are watching in the media, these are not the usual life. You know, we were walking without scarf, and encountering a police was the most dangerous thing someone can do. But I can, even myself, I cannot imagine myself doing that, you know, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. But I can see that people are doing without any fear of anything. So I think this is the first time this is happening. Yes.
I also read in some analysis that maybe the new policy that was adopted by the new president, or the president who was elected last year, which took the road of maybe tightening the rules for women, that it was a sign of desperation, that it was a sign that the economy is crackling down, and there are so many other problems that maybe they are really. They are aware that they're in trouble, and they're trying to just solve it by going back to the, I don't want to make an inappropriate joke, but go to classic, which is the classic of the revolution, so controlling women. So do you think that maybe this is a right analysis of the situation?
Yeah, obviously, like, the regime was trying to divert the attention of people from economic problems to something different. So President Raisi, I think it was from April this year, he started like much more harsher politics against women, with moral patrols being more present in the street, hustling women, basically. At the same time, there is a kind of, I wouldn't call it game, yeah, but a kind of contact between leader Rahbar Khamenei and President Raisi. Sometimes, you know, if something is not going well, is going wrong, you can find a victim, yeah, and you can say this is a fault of president, which is actually weaker power than a leader, a religious leader. But now, like, these positions are at the same level. Yeah, they are continuing in very harsh policy, like domestic policy. And again, I'm repeating myself, that people just don't see any option for the future. It's like just like getting worse and worse. And Khamenei, religious leader, in all his previous speeches, he just showed that he doesn't want to retaliate, he doesn't want to step back. Yeah, he didn't show any sign of negotiation from his part. So there are other players who sort of like open the door, but definitely not Khamenei.
And he's the one who, so to speak, calls the shots in Iran, or has this changed over the past couple of years? Because he's also quite elderly, he's in power for, if I'm not mistaken, decades. So,
well, I'm not sure, because, you know, the atomic circle of power is so vague for us, and even the leader himself, he's not appearing in the public, and, you know, it was kind of jokes that maybe he's dead a few years ago, or maybe he's an imaginary character in the TV because only Basiji and other people like them are going to meet him. So I don't know if he is the figure or others are the figure, but I can see that there is a circle, that they are supporting each other, and they are trying to, you know, remove anyone that is not 100% agree with them. Even the previous president, or like other people that they are also in the same team, but they are excluded now. So I can see the main circle is all united against the people right now, and I'm not sure who's making the decisions, because honestly, I don't want to put the Iranian government as a really solid logic government, because if you go to the history, they have done many mistakes. And they are doing it constantly. So I'm not thinking about a table that lots of intelligent people are taking decisions there. So I can see many autonomous people doing stuff like especially the chief of the police in the different cities. They act just by their own. So I can see the kind of chaos, and at the same time they are trying to do their best.
But maybe there's a chaos, but they have one unifying goal, and that is to stay in power. And as we know from many other stories and countries, that could be really powerful goal to aspire to. So that could be really dangerous. I also read an interesting information about the Revolutionary Guards, that there is even some maybe unrest within the Revolutionary Guards. Again, I know it's very difficult to especially get information like this, but that could be really important, right? That this is some kind of force that is keeping the regime in place.
Yes. First, I have to say that Iran has a conscripted army. Maybe that's some kind of similar to Czech Republic. So the people there, they are not all, aligned with their ideas of IRGC. So many of them are just ordinary people that they have to do their own duties. Or many administrative people that, they couldn't find any other jobs and they are enjoying the benefits and stuff. So it's not like all of them are in the same group. So in these specific moments, it's a moment that shows the differences among them, because some of them are willing to kill people easily, but we can see that some of them are hesitant. And you have to know that in Iran, what they do is just pick the different minorities to, oppress the other one. For example, in the Kurdish regions, they bring like people of the center of the country or the other regions, because it's really highly improbable that a Kurdish guy beaten another one. It is possible, but because they have some benefits maybe. At the same time, aside from all of these reasons, I can see that in the last years, even the economic situation is going to deteriorate their lives as well. I don't know how much they are earning, $2,000, $3,000, which is a lot of money there. But maybe at the same time they are suffering, they don't have the freedom in their life that they had 20 years ago or 10 years ago.
So it's not a way how to make a living being in the forces anymore. So maybe the loyalty could be also... It is
loyalty, and maybe some of them are still believing in this system because they think, okay, this is if they are going to be toppled down, other people are going to be like anti-Islam. So maybe they have this kind of justification in their minds that we are doing this for God, or we are doing this for the Prophet, or for the good of Islam.
Or the stability.
But this is minority of them, I can say.
As I mentioned before, we're in Václav Havel's library, and from the beginning of the protests, there was one main argument that said that there is probably not so much hope for them to succeed, and that was that the protests lack a clear leader, either a person or some kind of organization of movement. So is it still true, and why is that? Is it because all the opposition leaders are just for years and years and years harassed and imprisoned, or how come this is happening, and do you see anyone who could actually be that leader?
Yeah, exactly. The real opposition was suppressed in Iran. Any kind of signs of opposition was suppressed, so you cannot find one person which we can call a leader. But what we can see from abroad among Iranian diaspora, there isn't like particular leader neither, but there is a person called Ahmed Esmailpour living in Canada, and he crystallizes a natural leader of protesting Iranians abroad. He was an intellectual and a writer in Iran, back to Iran, and his wife and his 90-year-old daughter was killed, was actually shot in a Ukrainian plane. It was shot in 2020 by Iranians as a accident or revenge for killing of General Soleimani. So he has this huge emotional impact, and he managed actually to persuade even Canadian Parliament to further some steps for not accepting Iranian officials to Canada, and many other actions. So he's something like a natural leader, although he's not a political figure. In Iran, I don't think we can talk about one person now, but I don't think it must be obviously a disadvantage, as I have heard so many times in media, Western media, like why Iranian protests don't have a leader. It can be advantage as well, because if you have a leader, this leader, like after protest,
you just put him in prison.
Yeah, imprisoned or executed or whatever. Now the people are organizing themselves. Even we have told that it's extremely difficult. Yeah, they're still looking for kind of leadership or organization, but it's in the embryonic phase, but it will definitely happen that some leader will crystallize, or I think it will happen, even in Iran.
Is that Canadian possible leader maybe for you some kind of inspiration of what he's doing? Do you think that he could possibly unify the diaspora protests?
Well, before that I have to a little bit explain the opposition, because there are several different ways to think about it, but they are like, you know, right now most Iranian, I can say that they are willing to have a government and a system similar to what is it in the democratic countries. So a democracy is the highest value that people are pursuing right now. But the democracy can be implemented towards different, you know, systems. And right now there are still some monarchists, and they are leftists still, and the biggest portion are the people who are just trying to have a democracy without any specific person. Because I have to say that, you know, Iranian people right now, we are so afraid of giving so much, you know, credit to someone. Even to Ahmed Ismailion, you know, we are so cautious now that if we just you know, overlook everything and praise someone, probably it's going to be the next dictator. So we are just trying that, okay, if we are giving you this credit, this is for the limited time and this is for a certain purpose. So, you know, we cannot see anyone that is going to be head. Right now, maybe it can be a group of people, later will, you know, because it's really hard to, after 40 years of living in the, you know, in the dictatorship, it's really hard to find someone who thinks differently. Because I can see that the dictatorship idea is mainly in the mind of not the people, but people are somehow chanting that they want someone to come and fix the situation, which is not a good reason, which used to be like that, but specifically this time is really different. People are not searching for anyone. People are searching for themselves. And that makes me feel really good, because if people continue to think about it like that, afterwards, it's going to be different parties and different organizations trying to reach an agreement together, and they are not going to be satisfied with someone, which is the basement of the democracy. So right now, I think like that. And there is another point. In 2009, there was another leader inside Iran, which he was arrested, and he's still in, and he's a really old man. And he kind of disappointed people in that time, because, you know, there was like hundreds of thousands of people in the streets and they could do many bigger things. But he tried to calm them down, and people were still like, you know, hopeful to kind of reforms. But he's still there. He's really kind of old man. But at the same time, people were thinking that if we put all of attention in someone, that someone can destroy us whole, you know, results. So I think people are trying to go forward now, and then they will get an agreement.
I think maybe the whole debate about the leader and the possible someone ready to lead the protests come from the fact that when we analyze all the countries where this kind of change happened, and I have to, of course, mention Czechoslovakia or the Czech Republic or some other countries. It's quite clear that the better transition happened in countries where there was some kind of new elite ready, and with some kind of vision of what to do with the countries. And so in this sense, maybe that's why there's so much focus on the idea of leader of the opposition. But it makes complete sense what you're saying, that there was some kind of experience with the leader which was disappointed, and then it's just after 40 years of just fighting against the opposition that it's understandable that there's no one there. And do you think there could be a leader of the protests from abroad, as you mentioned? Do you think that this could work, that it actually can be someone who's not in the country personally?
I'm not 100% sure if Iranian society, Iranians living in Iran would accept that person who is living in diaspora. Yeah, there is all the time that kind of let's say, not misunderstanding, but not willing to accept someone who is living for years abroad, yeah, and not living in the same misery as we are living. I think they have very similar experience with our immigrants. Yeah. But what I have noticed when I was being in Iran, traveling in Iran, and I think it's just a great thing, there are roots, clear roots of civil society there. I've met many people, and definitely not only in large towns, but in the countryside as well, actively participating in fostering better conditions in their environment. I will just say a few examples. The situation with environment is extremely bad in Iran, and I would say that the officials are not taking necessary precautions, and the people are doing it. They are trying to protect their environment in on a very limited scale, but they are trying, and they are fighting with everyday problems because the bureaucratic system just doesn't allow them to do it. Or they are trying...
Again, sorry to interrupt. You could see the clear parallels again with what was happening in Czechoslovakia in the end of the 80s. That at the beginning of the demonstrations and protests, where people very, very unhappy with the environment and how the government was
exactly.
Not
so
care,
the only opposition, like environmental one. So it's starting like from the basis, or like protection of historical heritage in Iran, which, as we all know, probably it's like 2,500 years old. There are many places which are so old, and again, the regime or the government are not doing enough to protect it, and people are carrying themselves. So I think it's something which is not being mentioned too many times, or I haven't read it in I don't know, Western media, and obviously not in Iranian media. But for me, it's very important step toward the future. Yeah. So okay, we don't have leaders, we don't have any organization, like government organization. The people somehow are organizing themselves, and they are doing it in a very clever way. You know, they are not doing it in such activist way, so they would sparkle the interest of government to be suppressed right at the moment. Yeah, so
they're doing it in a smart way.
Exactly, but they are somehow effective. It's a long run. It will take a lot of time. Now again, it's interrupted somehow. We don't know what will be happening, but I think this is something what can be so important for the future. You know, if the regime will change or not, you know, like these people can change the whole society, the whole future of these youngers who are like desperate and protesting now.
And it's also very healthy base for the new free society, as we all know that the civic society is so important for just democracy to function and flourish.
Exactly, non-violent, active,
caring about
with a vision for the future.
Do you agree? Is this something that's important?
If you have heard the really famous song Baroye, like if you have heard about it, all verses that it was, it went so viral, and even the singer was arrested. But the verses that he was using in that was a collection of tweets of the people. And it was so interesting because it wasn't saying that, hey, I don't have a bread or I don't have a money, or it was just because of the animals here, because of the freedom, because of having, good sleep. because of having, you know, freedom of speech, because of, you know, all the things. If you see the verses, they are coming from, they are not, although there are it's really bad economic situation. I cannot say, I cannot deny that it's extremely bad. But at the same time, people are, you know, are not fighting for having more money or some really, you know, primitive things. They are fighting to reach the latest version of democracy. This is a really important thing, because I can see that in Iranian demands that they are not willing to have a just democracy. They want to have a government that protects all minorities, like LGBTQ, which is still, as we saw a few days ago in Slovakia, which is a hot topic here. But, you know, they want to just move all the steps up, and they want to have a society with a constitution that protects every kind of people with every need. You know, everyone is equal. So this is something that makes me like feel happy about the future. And to add to that, I can say that this phenomena of the whole thing is happening in a country that has been under oppression for 40 years, no access to free media, not that much foreigners there. You know, it's not like here, because people take it for granted that, hey, you can have some things, but that's it. You know, even watching some videos on internet is prohibited. You know, there is no free media there. So people are so enclosed to each other. And the only, you know, the way that to connect is through 200 VPNs or to people, diaspora, Iranian diaspora. So this movement is coming from that specific region, specifically from the women, that they are most oppressed there. And one of the cases I would like to mention that, because Mashy Amíní was a girl, a Kurdish, probably Sunni, I'm not sure. So it was from the third minority in Iran. You know, she's not from the center. She's a, you know, ethnic minority, religious minority, language minority. So that's the reason that you know, wakes people up, because the same thing can happen to everyone. Yeah.
So not only that she was a woman in this situation, but also she represented other important groups.
But I have to say that the women's, you know, the Iranian women are living on the condition that no one can understand. It is just about the basic laws of not being able to go into the stadiums or, you know, compulsory hijab. But it's not just like that. If you are being raped, I'm not eligible to say that, because maybe it would be better if Iranian women should say that. But if you're being raped, you need 4 men to come and be your witness in the court. If you are receiving some inheritance, you are receiving half of the man. If you are injured, the price that they can, you know, court assign to you is less than a half. So this is not, you know, you cannot ride a bicycle. You cannot go out of the country without your father or your husband's permission. And you cannot be a president, you cannot be a judge, you cannot. So, you know, you are already 10-0 back from men. And, you know, I had to mention that after 40 years, this is enough for them, because young Iranian teenagers see how other people, how other girls are living. And they cannot accept that.
Yeah, and what's the reason for this change for the generation? Is it the access to the internet? Because I just, again, read in Guardian this great quote from Iranian teenagers, which I think really nicely represent how the commonalities between, so to speak, Gen Zs in Iran and elsewhere. And the quote is, "We want the clerics to get lost," which I think is very nicely put. Our mothers didn't have the internet to tell the world what has done to them, but we do. So do you think that despite, of course, the state control of the media and of the internet, that there are some ways how to go around them, and through that the people, the young people, are able to connect with what's happening in the world, and that's why they are very different from the older generations, maybe?
Well, I can say yes, a big yes for that, but that's not the only reason. I can say that they witness the disappointment of their parents. And the more they are growing, they understand that there is no future for them. So they want to search happiness in their life, and they cannot see any ways. And especially in the last 10 years, it was like, you know, so many protests, and they were grow up in that atmosphere. You know, their parents were, you know, in the streets in 2009. They were, you know, younger in 2019, so they were already in the atmosphere, and they can see that with, you know, all the statistics, there is no hope. You know, the economy grow 1/4 what it was in the 10 years ago. So they can see that there is no future for them. And at the same time, yes, internet is really important. And I have to say that the Iranian teenagers, they're all like computer engineers, all of them, because here you can go and actually you can search even in Czech, hele dot something, and you can have access to everything. But there is impossible. This is the imaginary world for them. But still they are getting the access to others, and that's
because
really
they found a way how to somehow go around the rules, right? Do you understand it?
They are all ITs, you know, because of Iranians all the time have to download WhatsApp, Telegram, Signal, all these applications I wouldn't normally use. But at the same time, I wanted to add that they have a connection with our world. You know, they see every day how world can be different in different countries and different systems. So it's not that it is closed society, but the window is somehow open a little bit. And of course, it's a challenge for any kind of restrictive regime. If we wouldn't find a way how to replace this gap, it will just fall. It's destiny. And at the same time, what wasn't mentioned here, maybe Iran has one of the highest numbers in brain drain. So a lot of Iranians are leaving the country because of conditions. So I would say like that in every Iranian family has someone living in Canada, America, Western Europe.
And they don't come back? They stay abroad?
They can actually, it's very different comparing to our situation with Czechoslovakia before 1989. If we emigrated, we couldn't come back or it was difficult. No, Iranians, if they are not politically active, they can go and come back. Yeah, no, if they are politically active, of course, they would have a lot of problems, but they are like fluctuating quite easily. So this is another source of information for Iranians living in Iran. Yeah, and okay, so some cousin will come and with a different dress and different experience, different kind of fun or any kind of fun, which for youngsters is sort of forbidden in Iran. So it's, of course, it's extremely attractive for them.
Ariane, are you coming to go back home, or do you even see it possible at the moment, or it's too early to tell?
Well, I'm thinking about it actually every hour, every day, because it's a so sensitive topic for me. At the same time, I have family there, and even I cannot talk to them these days. I'm just getting news through my friends. And, you know, it has been like more than 2 months that I haven't had a proper call with my family. And, you know, at the end of the night when you're alone, it gets so hard. You know, you can feel the, you know, whole building on your shoulders that you cannot handle it anymore. And you want to go back, you want to be with your friends. And it's not just the communication, you know, I'm really worried of my friends. It's worth to mention that many of my friends right now are in the Evin prison or in the others. And the other night, if you're following the news, it was a big fire, gun shooting. I'm not sure what was happening there. And I couldn't sleep the whole night, like many other nights here, because I was thinking that what's happening to my friend. You know, this is a really close experience for me, and I was so nervous until the next day that I heard that he's fine. But I know him. When he's saying that he's fine, he's not fine. He probably has some broken bones or something in the... And so it's really hard for me right now to go and come back, but I can hear that the other Iranians are having some dangers going back in the airport. You know, what they do, and they can have the power is just take the passport mostly, so that you cannot come back, and then they have the time to do whatever they want to do for you. So I really want to go back, but at the same time, I don't know what to do. I'm thinking about family, I'm thinking about myself. And yeah, I have no answer for that, actually.
There is I didn't mention it in the beginning, but there is a space for you to answer questions. So maybe I would give you the opportunity to ask anything if you want. There should be a microphone, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm.
I don't think I need a microphone. I think I'm
you actually do, because really? We need it for the for the audience of Havel Channel. Thanks.
So now it's a test. I hope everybody can hear me even online. I have two questions. One is kind of short one. One is a little bit longer. The short one is on average, like how many people, like without any bias, is supporting the regime even silently? That'll be the first one. Like even like not, just tolerating, and maybe are scared, because we have many conservatives in here too, and the fear is what's leading them to being conservative. Is like it can be worse, like, and they do not trust, these youngsters and all this internets and the gangsters, and drugs and, like what can happen. Like now we have the stable regime with the God above all, and, like what percentage, unbiased, if there is any information even.
That's what I was just going to say. Is it even possible to actually know for sure? Because I can imagine that surveys are not really happening or anything like that. And the second question, do you want to ask now or after the answers?
Maybe answers
okay.
first.
Okay, so I can just briefly mention, and maybe Zuzana knows better. There is no statistics, but there is one thing only that I can mention, that last year was an election there, and the election, of course, is just like a show because all candidates were all proven and stuff. But in the day of the election, it's, the government said that it was like 50%, 51% participation, which they cannot say less. But at the same time, there are, foreign static proofs and stuff. They were saying that it's it was less than like a 30%, 10%. In my experience, I can see, I cannot give you any number. I agree with you that, yeah, people are, some of them conservative, especially old people, that they are more religious, maybe my grandma. But they are not actively, supporting them. That's a big difference. They are like more gray to be white or black. So if they see that the whole situation is changing, they are going to change their mind. But according to my experience, and this is not a valid thing, so I can say that maybe like 10% to 20%, 10% to 20%, something like that. But I cannot put them as a solid supporters. And that's a big difference, because in this protest we can see that people with hijab, without hijab, they are going together. So, I think after 40 years, finally the time has come for the religious people to differentiate themselves from what's happening there. And I can see a lot, because, even the older people, that they say this is not the Islam is like others. I'm not going to that topic, maybe I have different ideas, but I can see that they are trying to separate themselves. So maybe that 10-20% is now like 5-6% of solid people, that they may have some religious values or financial. So yeah, if you want to say.
I don't have any numbers, but what I have heard is that if at least 15% Iranian population would go into streets and protest, the regime would be overthrown. So it's not even 15% in the streets, but as Ariane told, I think like 6-7% maybe in the streets, direct support, and the numbers of indirect support, we don't know, because people don't talk about it, of course, directly. But Iran has 80 million or more than 80 million inhabitants. So let's say if 12 million would be in the streets, which is not yet, there would be a change or transformation. There's still a lot of people who are somehow taking benefits from the regime. So we don't know if they are really believing, trusting the system itself, or they are just like benefiting from the financial support. As Ariane has mentioned, Revolutionary Guard, Basiji, they are all hugely financed by regime for these reasons. So these people are still awaiting what will happen, if the protests will be continuing, if they should support it or not as well.
And you have a second question.
Yeah, thank you for the answers. The second question was, as you were debating about the verticality or horizontality of the movement, I read an article lately that with the era of the technologies, and as the police can go basically anywhere, it's not like in the past, that actually having a horizontal movement where there is no leader, it's making the protest much harder to target for the regime, because there is no head of the snake to chop. And they would do everything. Like if there would be a leader, they would just go after it. Like in Russia, there was Nemtsov, and he shot himself in the back on a bridge 7 times, right? And many others. With the horizontality, it's for sure having flaws. Like it's hard to talk, and there is like no one to do the speeches and kind of like to motivate the people. But as the mass is like moving and snowballing forward, it is like I can see the regime being super confused and not knowing what to do, because they don't know where to go. And there is traffic jams, right, in the streets of the big cities, because the police guys, they need to get there. They need to like, you know, organize, and as everybody, like some people go to the protests, some people go just to the streets with the cars to just stop everything, and the police cannot go. They just can't get there. So I read this idea about if you can like put your inputs towards like this to compare it, because my field of studies is actually biology, so I'm not studying that.
Are you making some parallels? You know,
what I can do. So if you know some cases from maybe like some recent history, or even like compared to further down past, what like the internet and kind of like the fluidity of the movement and the horizontality, because it's one of the first protests, and if it works, it will be the first one ever working that went like without. Yes, sure, there will need to be leaders that will need to define the future and like where the regime will go, and for sure they don't feel connected, as you said, to the people living in diaspora, because there's no connection, or like for them, the people living in the state. So yeah, please.
Yeah, this was a very nice parallel, this horizontal. Yeah, I think it would be the first movement. I wouldn't call it maybe revolution as yet, which wouldn't have a clear leader, like direct leader. Maybe the first woman's movement, not first woman's movement, but movement which was like thrilled and supported so much by women. And at the same time, it came to my mind, as you mentioned, how actually the protests look like. We didn't mention it yet. There are usually huge rows of cars which are beeping. Is it the right word in English?
Honking.
Honking, yeah. And diverting the attention of sources of police, yeah, or what I've heard, like the people are trying to organize themselves as some group is being occupied or taking attention of the forces, Basiji or militia, or with the Revolutionary Guard at one place, so the others can concentrate at the more important place, yeah. And all this is organized by social media, which are heavily censored or even crushed out. Yeah, so I don't know how they can do it right at the moment. It's kind of a miracle for me. How can they organize in these conditions and stuff? That they are like amazingly still continue, and as it was told, the regime, which before was get used to on targeting the exact targets, like leaders, like students, organizers, yeah, they don't know how to react now. This is a difference. That's why these protests are also different. Yeah, everything is very confusing for both sides. Yeah, and now I would say the protesters are not winning. Yeah, of course they are not winning, but they are one step in front of the regime, maybe. Yeah, but of course, it will depend, like, if the protests will continue, if the people will be not willing, but have energy and not be fearful to continue with the protest.
Well, I can just give you an example. That's a similar movement. I can see, like, Black Lives Matter in US. It's not comparable, but it was a kind of movement without a specific leader. So I think this is going to be a 21st century, or like kind of revolutions and kind of protests that people are trying to trust like a common sense instead of putting all credit in someone. But this is I agree with you that it's really hard to continue like horizontally instead of vertically. But at the same time, we can see some, similar things in other countries, like South Korea a few decades ago was like kind of that. Even here in Eastern Europe, I'm not going to say specifically, but for example, Romania wasn't a specific person. It was like a group of 2-3 people with, of course, under some people they were doing that. So it's not a 100% new phenomenon. But by the emergence of young people and the little bit of tiny internet, I think it is working, and it can be a role model for future.
I think it's interesting that just a couple of years ago I interviewed Timothy Garton-Ash about the year 1989. I just keep coming back to it, but I just see so many parallels. And he mentioned, I asked him specifically if he thinks that other regimes, I asked specifically about China, for instance, studied what happened in Central and Eastern European countries in 1989 and 1990, and it somehow affected the way they govern their countries. And he said absolutely, and we can see specifically in China how they learned from the, so to speak, mistakes of the communist regimes in these countries. And you also mentioned it that the Iranian government also just thinks about how to actually tackle these protests. So maybe this is just a learning curve on the side of the protesters, as the governments learn how to go against these protesters. The protesters actually learn and develop and find new ways how to do it. So maybe it's just ever evolving thoughts about how to overthrow a government. So maybe we just see something new here.
If you mentioned Timothy Ash, it just came to my mind that this is a sort of paradox which I have noticed in Iran, and it all the time surprises me. That a part of that, it's of course like a very closed society with many restrictions and a huge censorship on publishing houses as well. The work of Timothy Snyder was translated into Persian, and you can quite easily read it in Persian. Václav Havel, The Power of what's bezmocný? Powerless was translated in Persian, and you can read it. All works of Ivan Klima were translated into Persian, and you can read it. So for me, all the time I was just questioning myself, like, okay, these all are sort of like recipes how to get rid of dictatorship. Isn't it like that? And you can read it in Persian. So this is one of many paradoxes which you can find in Iran. It's don't consider it as closed society as we sometimes may assume from media. It's not Northern Korea. I wouldn't even compare it to China or maybe Russia. Yeah, you can find some kind of ways how to get information, and not only from Western media or from Western social media. It's not an easy question how to unpuzzle all these puzzles of Iranian society.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's some other questions. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for an amazing debate. I have a question as a hijabi Muslim woman living here, and this is my home here. I was born here. I'm originally from Sudan, so we also had a revolution. We also had to go through stuff. But I wanted to ask, because we do stand with Iranian women, and I know that the first day that all the events happened, we all posted social media. We tried to really bomb social media from the Muslim community here, that we do stand with them and that we are against the regime. But yet a lot of, I would say like really a lot of hate was targeted towards us. And a lot of here, the society itself, we already do have issues facing racism, facing Islamophobia. So I wanted to ask you, how do you think that it should be approached from us, from Muslim women or Muslim community as it is in the Czech Republic, and how we should speak up about it? Because the Muslim community will not speak up against Islam, doesn't make sense, but also here, when you hear Islamic Republic, you automatically somehow merge it within Islam, and so we try to somehow keep it separated, which is really hard, and at the same time speaking up. So how do you think that this should be approached from us, or how do you think that how do you think that we could speak about it more in the correct way? Thank you.
It's an excellent question, you know, and I would want to emphasize that Iranian women never mentioned they want to get rid of hijab because of Islam. Islam is not an issue right now, you know. Hijab in Iran is a kind of symbol, the most important symbol of Islamic revolution from 1979. Maybe the only pillar which is being left from ideals of Iranian revolution. Yes, so I have never heard, like during the protest, that the hijab would be directly connected to Islam only. You know, it's connected to repressions of Islamic Republic of Iran. You can say more, and after that I will continue with the answer, like how can you act as a Muslim woman living in the Czech Republic?
Well, as I mentioned before, I cannot see any fights between like Islam and Iran. Honestly, I have to say that, you know, I just saw like another consensus, another you know, data from somewhere that it shows that only 30-some% of Iranians are now believing in Shia Islam, which used to be much more before. And among the new generations, I can see just the tiny shadow of it that it used to be to our parents. But at the same time, they are fighting for liberal values, and liberal values is the place that there is a space for everyone to speak. So even now, it's really maybe good to mention that, you know, the government itself is trying to just, you know, tear apart the Quran or put fire on the mosque, and someone accidentally is taking film of them. So it's really funny that this is their own job, because they want to, you know, keep this fear of people that, hey, if they take the power, they're going to remove Islam and stuff. Mm-hmm. But there is you know, one demand maybe Iranian people have from the Muslim communities, because I can understand that, yeah, already in the West there are lots of oppressions against hijabi or Muslim people, as well as many others. But, you know, and I saw that, you know, many of my friends from like other Middle Eastern countries, they were thinking that, okay, maybe we shouldn't support them, because if we support hijab, you know, in the US or Canada or France, they are going to ban hijab, or maybe they are going to, you know, misunderstand the whole problem. But I think this is their own job to clarify as much as they can, because we don't have a voice not in Iran now, outside. You know, it's really hard to receive our voice to others, but we are just trying to say that, you know, we want peace. Before the revolution, I'm not going to say that it was a paradise, but it was, you know, a bar next to the mosque, and nothing was happening. So, and I think if we are insisting on the, you know, minority values, like the LGBT people, like the minority religions or ethnicities, we are just talking about that everyone should have the, you know, same right. And about how it's going to happen for the Muslim communities outside, I cannot say anything, but in Iran I can see that people are not going to put fire on mosques. Yeah, they are really angry, honestly, and they think that yeah, religion took all of the values of their life. So, you know, younger people are like, they are really radical communities, I cannot deny that. But at the same time, they think that we are going for liberalism, so we have to start from ourselves.
And you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, the message from Iranian women is not that they want to replace hijab with forceful not wearing scarf or hijab. They want to say, we want to wear what we want. If we want, we can wear hijab. If we don't want, just be without hijab, without any scarf. Yeah. So I think it's absolutely right if you will show your support to Iranian movement or Iranian women with hijab being on your head. Yeah, it's nothing contradictory for me, at least. I don't know for Iranian women protesters.
Oh. And hijab right now is like, it's a common example that many people saying it looks like a, you know, Berlin's Wall. That, you know, the whole structure of the Islamic regime is based on that, you know, we are covering half of the population by force. So if that force breaks, you know, they don't have any, you know, solid power to grab it. So, but it doesn't mean that it's, you know, people are going to take each other's scarf. It used to be like that in Iran. Maybe you don't know that in 1935. It was a year in the previous kings that they prohibited hijab. So it was forcibly removable. And it was like that for 5-6 years. So we had the experience of both ways. And right now people are saying, come on, we shouldn't put some regulations on these people.
Yeah, I think if people shout at you for supporting Iranian women while wearing hijab, for me personally, they're the same people who shout at Iranian women for not wearing hijab. If it's your personal choice and you express your religion by this or your personal beliefs, then it's your choice. And I think this is the core of the discussion, whether it's Iran or in Ukraine as well,
or France,
and I even now think very, very broadly, because I also write quite extensively about the whole debate about abortion. It's all about controlling women and stopping them from making decisions about their own lives. And I think it's at the core of all these debates, whether it's in Europe about who can wear hijab and not, or in Iran who can wear hijab or not. So I think that's the common denominator.
And Islamic regimes has two issues with hijab. First, they claim it's your Muslim woman's Muslim identity, and we can talk about it. If for a majority of Iranian women, is it their real identity? And that it protects you from men. So the woman with a proper hijab, according to this logic, is being protected by from the violence of men. Yeah? But it's not happening. Yeah? Even if you are wearing proper hijab, you can be raped, and it is happening all the time. Yeah? So all these kinds of issues or arguments are just not being valid anymore in Iran, at least.
It doesn't make sense, simply. Yeah. Are there any other questions? Did we answer your question? Yeah. No other question. But I was just very briefly will ask one more question about the hijab, because I think it's very, very interesting. Why do you think it became, you already mentioned it, but I want to ask again, why do you think it became such a strong symbol? And you, Zuzana, mentioned that it's one of the last things that actually survived, so to speak, the ideals, if I can say it, of the Islamic Revolution, that nothing else is left, is just the only thing, the last thing? Is it because it's actually, you know, easier control women, or it's why is it such a key element of of the
because
society?
from the beginning of Islamic regime, after revolution, regime connected their ideals with hijab as well. Not only with hijab, but with a woman dressed in hijab, like with proper Islamic women who would be supportive to the regime, who would be standing with the same values of this regime. And actually it was very interesting because Khomeini, after the Islamic Revolution, it was somehow expected that he would abolish vote for women, and it didn't happen. And he even didn't separate women from visiting universities. Yeah. So now the result is that there is 60 or 70% of students at universities women. Yeah. So it's again one of the paradoxes. So as I told before, this was a very strong pillar of essence of Islamic Republic. Yeah? And what is left from these ideals of Islamic Republic, one of different definitions, was social equality. Yeah? It was one of the main mottos of Islamic Revolution. And where are we now? Yeah, the scissors are being widely open again, as it was before revolution. You know, the people connected with regime, their families are living in luxury houses. Their family members are living, for example, in Western countries. So very similar situation like with oligarchs in Russia. And there is a huge portion of Iranians living in much more poor conditions. 40 or 50% of Iranians are living under below the poverty line. Yeah,
wow.
Yeah.
I even read recently, sorry to interrupt, I even read that it's becoming so bad that eggs are luxury, or like poultry or like meat becoming luxury item for many Iranians. So that tells us that it's really getting really worse and worse.
Yeah, exactly. So so what is being left from all these mottos and slogans of Islamic Revolution? Maybe the only thing which is still left is the hijab. Yeah, so that's why regime is so desperately still grabbing and holding this line. And there are some Iranian activists living in diaspora who are actually claiming, you will certainly say more about it, that if getting rid of the hijab, Islamic Republic will come to the end as well. And I don't know if this can be right or not, but it's definitely one of the threats which Islamic regime fears a lot.
And they're mentioning it again today. I saw an article, a headline that hijab is our red line. Still, after 1 month of this protest, you know, they are not willing to go even one step back. So, and they just raised the salary of the morality police as well. So they are just trying to do all the options on the table to do. And another thing that, you know, I have to mention again, economically is really devastating. You know, workers are not getting salaries for months. And, you know, going on a strike in Iran is the same danger, because, you know, if you lose your job, probably you're not going to have any source of income. And, you know, just recently it was a strike it is actually a strike in the, you know, sugar industry. It's called Haftape in the south. And they just paid the workers, some of them, something equal to 150 euros, you know, like 6,000 crowns something. But still they are there. So this is a huge point, because, you know, economic reasons are one of the main pillars. It has been in last years, and it is. But, you know, if it was just economic, after receiving money, they had no motivations to continue. But they are continuing. So it shows that, you know, people are demanding more than just money and any economic value. So I wanted to mention that also, because that's really also brave. You know, if you are not receiving your, there is no code of labor there. The code of labor is whatever the employer says. So if they are strike, they are going to easily be replaced. And they are doing that, and they are, you know, they are doing it in the oil industry, which is the most important thing for them. So I would like to say that it's the other aspect as well.
Are there any more questions? If there,
can have one.
Yeah.
You know,
Just wait for the.
so much hello. There's so much debate about this hijab, and I'm just still keep wondering. Sorry to be honest, maybe I don't know, but has never ever happened some similar issue before? How come it went so viral and so, you know, potent, and, you know, people are, you know, just doing this social media things, and it's really discussed, and but I'm missing some piece. How come, you know, it became so potent, you know, and so discussed because some girl, you know, and I know only the media, which I don't trust, so it's, you know, the version, I mean, and it's like, yeah, okay, this Kurdish girl and covered, you know, less strictly than usual and than expected. So how come, you know, it became such a visible and heard and followed?
Yeah, I just before you answer,
does it make sense?
I want to. Yeah, well, if you look at the broader context, maybe it does make sense, because I just forgot to mention. I just found this number, which I found very interesting, and this claim that Iranian women always resisted these rules. And I found this very interesting figure that said that in 2014, newer numbers are not available because somehow it was considered unsafe to disclose these numbers. But in 2014 alone, according to government figures, Iranian so-called morality police warned, fined or arrested 3.6 million women for inappropriate dress in 1 year. So I think, you know, maybe to answer your questions a bit, it wasn't like everybody was following the rules and suddenly just one incident sparked this protest. I think it's going on for years and years and years, and this was just some kind of accelerator.
You know, from a global perspective, you know, the society is really in decline. Somehow, you know, there are, you know, well, as everyone know, like, you know, China and Ukraine. So, you know, there are, of course, you know, Iran is a huge country, a civilization, and in between of these countries, so, you know, it's just some kind of also society dynamics, right?
Yeah.
So to say.
So again,
yeah, as it was told, these atrocities against women were just happening like for 40 years with different kind of intensity. As I told at the beginning of this year, it got worsened. And this is a reaction. I think it was obvious this incident would happen one day, sooner or later. Yeah, and maybe with Mahsa, because when she was attacked in the detention, it was a car. We don't know what exactly happened, but she was probably beaten in detention car. Then she went to detention center. She fell into coma, and within 2 days she died. But from the first moment when she went to the hospital, she was brought to the hospital, there was a social media cover of this story. Yeah. So what has usually happened before, like if this incident as this has happened, like no one knew, yeah, or it appeared like several days after that everything was finished, and it just like didn't cause any action, yeah. But I can remember it myself because I was in Iran at the day, and my friends was following the story of Mahsa from the beginning, yeah, for 2 days when she was in coma, yeah, and we were just like sort of like thinking what has happened, because it was obvious that she didn't have heart problems or what the regime was claiming, yeah. So maybe even the speed and the emotional story or the personal story of this girl has like spread it the larger community and community of Kurdish people, because Kurdish people are very family orientated and ethnic orientated, yeah. So everything just got a little bit faster, yeah. It's not question like why this case caused the kind of movement, yeah, because there was many cases before. One, second, Iranian women were extremely active in last decades, yeah, and as I was telling that the opposition, real opposition, was being destroyed in Iran or damaged, women were maybe the only opposition which was left, yeah. So I don't know if this is the answer. There are many.
Maybe it's always a perfect moment, isn't it? It's always some kind of moment where so many things meet at once that creates these moments in these uprisings.
I can add one point, because the society was already in like a barrel full of gunpowder. You know, just before this was coronavirus, and just in 2019 December and October, and then later in the January 2020 was already protest in the streets, and it was a widely nationwide protest as well. And that was stopped not because of operation, because of coronavirus. And it is worth to mention that the Iranian regime was the only one that had the direct flights to Wuhan on those times, in the center of COVID, and they didn't put any lockdowns. So they were just promoting the COVID to stop that, and that they were successful, and they were willing to prolong the COVID. Iranian government, this is a really sensitive comment even for me, because we lost 500,000 people in the COVID unofficially, but because of there was no vaccines, the Iranian supreme leader went to the TV and he said like that, I don't allow any Western vaccines in this country. So now we can see the continuation of what it used to happen before. Because now, finally, COVID is something, settled down much later than the other countries. And there should be another thing that I have to say, because it tears my eyes and my heart apart. Because at the same time that they weren't, importing any vaccines, we can see right now that in the tear gases or some bullets or some military equipment, it's made in UK 2020. So first, this is the Western countries, and this shows how inefficient sanctions are. I, as an Iranian, I cannot have bank account here, but they can sell guns to them. What the sanction is that? I don't understand. And at the same time, it shows how hypocrite is Iranian government, because yes, vaccines from the West is bad, but the tear gases is not. So I wanted to mention that this is the continuation. This is not just a phenomenon.
Yeah, I think this is really important to add that the frustration, like everywhere, not only Iran, was greatly supported by 2 years of pandemic. So yeah,
it is.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for coming. It was extremely interesting, and I have to say, I don't know if you agree with me, but I come from the debate with a slight sense of optimism, or maybe hope that it's not all lost. That it's maybe there is a hope. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe you don't agree, Ariane, but
I am.
Yeah, you do. So we'll see how it'll work out. So thank you so much, and maybe I'll see you next time in the library. Thank you and good night.